Have you ever felt underestimated? Like, people didn't think you could achieve something really amazing.
Yeah. I think we've all been there at some point.
Well, today we're going to explore a story that totally flips that script.
Oh, cool. I love those kinds of stories.
We're talking about a high school football team, but not your typical Friday Night Lights.
Oh, interesting.
This team's entirely made up of deaf students at the California School for the Deaf in Riverside.
Wow. What a unique story. So it's more than just sports, right?
Exactly. It's a story about human potential and resilience and the power of community when facing some really unique challenges.
I'm intrigued.
Okay, so imagine this. Riverside, California.
Okay.
California School for the Deaf. It's a pretty small school, only about 168 high school students.
Hmm.
And their football team, well, they hadn't exactly been known for winning seasons.
Right. Makes sense.
But then, in 2021, things took a crazy turn.
Oh,
The team went undefeated.
undefeated. Wow.
Yeah, it was unexpected. And this incredible turnaround caught the attention of a New York Times reporter, Thomas Fuller, who was actually looking for positive stories during, all the pandemic stuff.
I can imagine there weren't many of those going around.
Exactly. And he was so drawn in by the story that he traveled to Riverside just to see it for himself.
Makes sense. Got to see it to believe it sometimes.
Honestly. And I bet witnessing a football game where the players can't hear the snap count or calls, it's got to be a completely different experience.
Yes, must be. So how do they even communicate on the field? I mean, football relies on split-second decisions.
Absolutely. So they developed this incredible system using a blend of visual cues and a modified form of sign language.
Wow.
It's mind-blowing. They basically turned what many would see as a weakness into a strategic advantage.
It's like they're playing a whole different level of the game.
I know, right? Okay, so we've got this amazing team, but they need an equally amazing coach, right?
Of course.
So tell us about Coach Keith Adams.
Well, Coach Adams is deaf himself, and a former athlete, too. He really gets what these players are going through, both on and off the field.
Yeah, that must make a huge difference.
Absolutely. It goes beyond just coaching plays. It's about creating a space where these young men can thrive, given everything.
I see. So he's like a mentor as much as a coach.
Exactly. Now, even with the best coach, some of these players were facing challenges far beyond the football field.
I can imagine.
There's this one player, his story really stood out to me. He was sleeping in his father's car, in a Target parking lot, no less, for a good chunk of the season.
What? Serious?
Yeah, due to some really tough family stuff going on.
That's incredible. Just showing up for practice and games without weighing on you. I can't even fathom it.
It's crazy, right? The resilience is unbelievable.
It really speaks to the power of this team being like a family, a support system.
100%. And get this, another player played through a broken leg during a crucial game.
No way.
Yeah. Talk about commitment.
That's insane. You
Yeah.
hear those stories. But to think it actually happened, it says a lot about their dedication to each other, to the team.
It really does. They weren't just playing for themselves. They were playing for something much bigger.
So their success, it became a symbol, right, of overcoming obstacles, defying expectations.
Exactly. It's a story that goes way beyond the sport itself. It raises the question, what barriers do we all face, and how can we break through them?
I like that. Now, their story also sheds light on something many people might not fully grasp. Deaf culture in America has a pretty complex history,
Oh, absolutely.
full of challenges.
For sure. Deaf people have historically faced so much prejudice and limited opportunities in many aspects of life. It's really quite sad.
And even their way of communicating, signing, sometimes that was actively discouraged.
Especially in educational settings, which is so backwards when you think about it.
It's heartbreaking to think about the barriers they've had to navigate just to be heard, to be understood.
You're right, it's really tough to imagine. But even with all that, a vibrant and incredibly resilient deaf culture emerged. They created their own communities, their own schools, their own ways of connecting. It's beautiful, really.
And this team's success, it becomes a beacon for that whole community, wouldn't you say?
100%. It challenges assumptions about what's possible. It shows that with the right support, any barrier can be broken. It flips the script on what defines limitations. It's pretty powerful. It really is inspiring to see how this team's success kind of sparked change, Challenging how people view deaf culture and making people more aware of its richness and resilience.
And it all comes back to communication, right? It's something we take for granted so often, is hearing people.
You're absolutely right. We rely so much on spoken language, but this team shows us there's so much more to it than just words. It's about understanding each other, connecting, and empathy. They really turned what some might see as a weakness into something powerful.
Absolutely. Now, we've talked about some of the challenges these players faced, but I want to go back to the student sleeping in his father's car. His story really hit me hard.
Oh, yeah. It just shows how powerful community and belonging can be. Think about it. Most teenagers, if they were going through that, they'd have trouble focusing on school, let alone playing a sport at that level.
Right. But for him, the team was like a safe haven, a place where things made sense when his life was anything but stable.
Yeah, it was stability and support when he needed it most. Makes you wonder, how did this team create such a strong sense of family? It wasn't just the coach, was it?
Right.
There had to be something more.
I think it was this shared understanding. They all knew what each other were going through, the good and the bad. They communicated on a level that went beyond words, It's a bond you don't see every day.
Yeah.
It makes sense when you think about how they played, too. Remember the player who played with a broken leg? That wasn't just toughness. That was loyalty.
You're right. It was a commitment to something bigger than just himself. He was playing for his teammates, the school, the whole deaf community, really. It was like this act of defiance, proving they wouldn't be stopped.
And that victory, it became a victory for anyone who's ever been told they can't do something because of who they are or how they communicate.
You said it. Now, thinking about it historically, it's interesting. For so long, sign language wasn't allowed in schools. Deaf children were forced to learn in ways that didn't always work, which really messed with their chances at a good education and even just fitting in.
I can't imagine being told I couldn't use the language that came naturally to me, the one I express myself best with.
Yeah, it's a form of, linguistic suppression. It's had some lasting consequences for the deaf community, that's for sure. But despite that, they've created this amazing culture, these spaces where they can connect and be themselves.
And that resilience, it's like it's woven into the team's success. It becomes this story about the human spirit more than just football.
Exactly. It's a reminder that diversity is a strength, not a weakness. It's when we accept and celebrate each other's differences that we become a better society.
You're absolutely right. Their story highlights how much we all want to be seen, to be heard, to be valued for who we are.
It's a universal desire, really, and it resonates with anyone who's ever felt like they don't belong, underestimated, excluded.
So it goes beyond words, this idea of true communication. It's about empathy, understanding, and finding ways to connect despite our differences.
100%. And it makes us ask, how can we be more inclusive in our lives? How can we build those spaces where everyone feels valued and respected, no matter their background or abilities?
Great questions.
Right.
And we've talked about those challenges, but let's dive into their communication style. What about it made them so unstoppable on the field?
It's a good question. It's what makes this team so fascinating. They took something that's seen as a disadvantage, not being able to hear, and they made it their strength. Think about it. In football, you've got snap counts, calls, all that, right? They created a system using visual cues. That's it.
Wow. So it's like a silent game, really pushing this nonverbal communication most teams never have to think about.
You got it. And because of that, they trust each other more. They're more connected as a team. They have to be totally in sync, know each other's moves before they happen, reading each other's cues like it's second nature.
Almost like they've got their own secret language.
I know, right? It's amazing. A language built on those visual cues, hand signals, and this deep understanding of each other. And that's become their superpower.
Their superpower. I like that.
Yeah, it lets them communicate clearly even when it's loud and crazy, change plays without the other team knowing. They're not just overcoming a barrier. They're turning it into something that gives them an edge.
It's amazing. It really shows how innovation can come from anywhere, even places you wouldn't expect.
It reminds me of something Fuller wrote in his book about the team. He said, deafness, unlike a physical handicap, is essentially a language barrier with the hearing world. Such a profound observation, isn't it?
It is. It makes you think about deafness differently. It's not a lack of something. It's just a different way of experiencing and communicating. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it highlights how important it is to bridge that gap, to make space for deaf individuals to communicate in a way that feels natural to them.
So it's recognizing that communication can take so many forms and that really understanding each other comes from empathy, patience, and willingness to learn from those who experience the world differently.
Exactly. And it challenges us, right? It makes us think about how we can be more inclusive in how we interact with each other, how we can break down those barriers that keep us from truly connecting.
Yeah, it's a good reminder. Now, we focused a lot on the team's communication, but I want to circle back to Coach Adams for a moment. We know he's deaf, but how did his leadership play a role in their success?
Well, Coach Adams's impact wasn't just about strategy or technique. It was deeper than that. Being deaf himself, he connected with the players in a way others couldn't. He understood what they were going through on a personal level.
So he was more than a coach.
Yeah, he was a mentor, someone they could look up to, a living example of what was possible. He taught them how to face those challenges head on.
And I imagine he did this by creating an environment of trust.
For sure, a place where they felt comfortable being themselves and pushing their limits. He brought the team together, made them feel like a family, like they could overcome anything as long as they had each other's backs.
And that unity, that support for one another, that was their secret weapon, wouldn't you say?
Without a doubt. They were playing for each other, for their coach, their community, and really for any deaf person who's ever been told they can't achieve their dreams. Their story proves that anything is possible when we support each other and don't let challenges define us.
Now, while Coach Adams was essential, we can't forget the incredible individual journeys of each player. Let's go back to the player who slept in his dad's car. It's hard to imagine the strength it took to come to practice in games every day, knowing you didn't have a place to call home.
It's a level of resilience most people can't even grasp. But for him, the team was normalcy, an escape from everything else going on. It gave him purpose when things were tough.
It really speaks to how sports can help people get through tough times. Yeah.
Absolutely. For him, football wasn't just a game, it was a refuge where he could connect with people who got it.
And that connection gave him the strength to keep going.
It's pretty remarkable. It shows how we can find strength in the most unexpected places, even when things feel impossible.
And it makes you realize how important it is to create those supportive environments, places where young people feel safe and encouraged to reach their full potential, regardless of the challenges they're facing.
It's so true. His story makes me think about something Thomas Fuller wrote in his book about the team. He said, deafness, unlike a physical handicap, is essentially a language barrier with the hearing world.
Yeah, it's a different way of looking at it.
Right, and it makes us think about bridging that gap, finding ways to let deaf individuals communicate freely and genuinely.
It's realizing that communication can look different for everyone. It's about being patient and open to learning from each other.
Exactly. And it challenges us to think about how we can be more inclusive in our own lives, breaking down those barriers to genuine connection.
Now, as moving as this player's story is, it's just one example of the many things these young men went through on their path to an undefeated season. We talked about the player who played through a broken leg. What do you think that moment meant, not just for him, but for the whole team?
That moment, it summed up the team's spirit perfectly. They weren't just trying to win, they were proving to themselves and to everyone else that they could achieve anything no matter what.
It was like a statement.
Exactly. It was like they were saying, we won't be broken, we won't give up, we're going to push through this.
And that message resonated beyond the game itself. It's an inspiration for anyone facing a challenge, a reminder that we're all capable of incredible resilience.
Imagine seeing your teammate playing through that kind of pain. It must have been incredibly motivating for the rest of the team.
It's like they drew strength from his sacrifice, realizing they could push themselves further, knowing what he was willing to endure for the team.
Absolutely. It was a shared experience of resilience. They knew they could overcome anything as long as they had each other's backs.
And that's the heart of teamwork, isn't it? It's supporting each other, pushing each other to be better, and knowing you can rely on one another.
It's recognizing that we can complement each other, make up for each other's weaknesses, and become something stronger together than we could ever be alone.
The Cubs story is a powerful reminder that we can achieve amazing things when we work together and support each other. They didn't let adversity define them. They used it as fuel.
And it makes us think about how we can apply those lessons to our own lives. How can we build those communities of support, celebrate our differences, and use them to make each other stronger?
Their story has been so inspiring. But before we move on, I want to go back to the historical context of deaf culture in America for a moment. Can you talk about some of the specific challenges they faced throughout history and how those challenges have shaped their culture and identity?
That's a great point. To really get what the Cubs achieved, we have to understand that history. Deaf people have been dealing with prejudice and discrimination for centuries, often seen as less capable than hearing people. It's pretty disheartening to think about.
The barriers they've had to overcome just to be treated as equals, it's unimaginable.
Yeah, These barriers were everywhere, in education, jobs, even simple social interactions. Sign language was often forbidden in schools. Deaf children had to learn through methods that were often ineffective and made them feel isolated. It's just not right.
Being denied the ability to communicate naturally, to express yourself fully, it's just wrong.
It was a kind of linguistic oppression, had a huge impact on the deaf community. But the amazing thing is, despite all that, they persevered, creating a vibrant and unique culture that embraces their way of communicating and experiencing the world. It's really quite beautiful.
That resilience is truly inspiring. They took what was meant to hold them back and turned it into a strength, creating a world where visual communication isn't just a need, but an art form.
Exactly. It's a reminder that diversity shouldn't be feared. It should be celebrated. It makes our lives richer.
Absolutely. When we open ourselves up to different ways of being and communicating, we all benefit. We create a better society for everyone.
You know, it's fascinating how the Cubs story fits into the broader history of deaf culture. Their win was more than just a sports victory. It was a symbolic victory over centuries of oppression and being pushed to the margins.
It challenged all those assumptions about deafness and showed the world that deaf people are just as capable, determined, and deserving of recognition as anyone else.
Their success gave hope to the entire deaf community. It showed their resilience, talent, and unwavering spirit. It's a story that will inspire others for generations to come, reminding us that we can overcome anything when we embrace our differences, support each other, and refuse to let challenges define us. And it challenges us, right? It makes us think about how we can create a fairer world where everyone has the chance to thrive, no matter who they are or what challenges they face.
Absolutely. Now, we've talked a lot about the Cubs and deaf culture, but I want to touch on the role of the media. When Thomas Fuller came to Riverside to cover the team, he had this unique opportunity. He could either reinforce stereotypes or help break them down.
That's so true. It shows how powerful storytelling can be. Fuller had a responsibility to tell their story authentically, not just about their wins, but about who they were as people, their struggles, and their way of communicating.
And it seems like he did a good job. He didn't just focus on the sports aspect, he also went into the cultural and historical context of deafness, sharing the players' personal stories.
He went above and beyond the typical sports story. He saw this as a chance to change perceptions and help people understand a community that's often misrepresented.
And by sharing those stories with respect and empathy, he helped people connect with the deaf community in a more meaningful way.
His reporting sparked conversations about inclusion, accessibility, and the importance of celebrating diversity. It was a catalyst for change.
It's amazing how journalism can make a real difference in the world.
It's a reminder that the stories we choose to share and how we share them matter. They can have a huge impact.
But as important as Fuller's reporting was, ultimately it was the Cubs' hard work and dedication that made them successful.
Absolutely. They're the real heroes here. They defied expectations, challenged norms, and proved that embracing our differences can lead to extraordinary things.
Their legacy will inspire others to break down barriers, chase their dreams, and build a more inclusive world.
You know, as we think back on their journey, it's incredible how their story connects with so many universal human experiences. Overcoming adversity, finding strength in each other, and the power of communication to bridge gaps.
It's a story that goes beyond culture, reminding us of what it means to be human, to connect, understand each other, and strive for a better world.
And it shows us that true success isn't just about winning or losing. It's about the impact we have on each other and the positive change we bring to the world.
As we wrap up our discussion, I want to leave our listeners with a few questions to think about. We've discussed the Cubs' communication on the field, but how can we apply those lessons to our own lives, even if our challenges are different? How can we be more aware of how we communicate, create inclusive spaces, and support those who are going through things we might not fully understand?
Those are important questions. The Cubs story teaches us that true communication is about so much more than words. It's about empathy, understanding, and meeting people where they are. It's about realizing everyone has a story to tell. And by listening with open hearts and minds, we can learn from each other and build a more connected world. You know, it's amazing how this story makes us rethink what communication really is.
Yeah, it's easy to forget how much we rely on speaking, but the Cubs show us how powerful those nonverbal cues can be.
You're right. It's not just about the words we say. It's about connecting with each other on a deeper level, understanding and empathy. The Cubs had to be incredibly creative to communicate on the field. They used everything, hand signals, facial expressions, even the way they moved their bodies. And get this, they even used vibrations on the ground to share information.
Wow, vibrations. That's incredible. So they're basically playing a completely silent game.
Exactly. It's a level of nonverbal communication that most teams never even think about. And because of that, they've built this incredible trust and bond as a team. They have to be totally in sync, predicting each other's movements, reading those cues instantly.
It's like they developed their own secret language, a language based on visuals and a deep connection with each other.
You got it. And that language, it's become their superpower. It lets them communicate in all that chaos and noise, changing plays without the other team knowing what's coming. It's a testament to how adaptable and innovative humans can be.
So we've talked about how it helps them on the field, but I'm curious, what about off the field? Does being so aware of nonverbal cues affect how they interact with hearing people?
That's a great question. You see, in deaf culture, visual communication is everything. They're incredibly tuned in to those subtle cues like facial expressions, body language, even the energy in a room. It's like they're picking up on things most hearing people miss entirely.
It's almost like they have a sixth sense for human connection.
In a way, they do. And it helps them in all aspects of life. Relationships, work, you name it. It's like a secret advantage, this deeper understanding of how people behave.
It makes you wonder what we as hearing people can learn from that. How can we be more aware of those nonverbal cues and use them to connect better with others?
That's a great point. We're so focused on words that we often miss the power of what's not being said. The Cub story is a reminder that real communication goes beyond just talking. It's about being present, paying attention, and tuning into those subtle things that tell us so much about what someone is truly feeling.
It's about listening with our eyes as well as our ears.
Exactly. And when we learn to do that, when we bridge that gap between the spoken and the unspoken, we open ourselves up to a whole new level of connection and understanding.
As we wrap up this incredible story, I keep coming back to this idea of invisible barriers. We all have them, things that hold us back. The Cubs faced a very real barrier with their deafness, but they didn't let it stop them. They found a way to not just overcome it, but to make it a strength. It's a powerful message for anyone who's ever felt limited or underestimated.
It really is. And it makes you think, what are our own invisible barriers? What's stopping us from achieving our dreams? Is it fear, doubt, or what society tells us we can't do? The Cubs remind us that we have so much potential no matter what challenges we face. It's about finding our own way to communicate, to connect, and to break through those barriers.
It's about embracing what makes us different, supporting each other, and never giving up on the belief that anything is possible. This team's journey is a testament to how powerful the human spirit can be. It shows us that we can overcome adversity and inspire change. It makes us question our assumptions, expand our understanding of communication, and embrace the beauty of diversity in all its forms.
And it leaves us feeling hopeful. Even when faced with what seem like impossible obstacles, the human spirit can prevail. Their story is a gift, a reminder that we all have the power to break down those barriers, connect with each other, and create a more compassionate world.
So as we close our exploration of the Cubs story, I want to leave you with this final thought. What will you do to break down those invisible barriers in your own life? How will you use your voice and your abilities to make a difference? The Cubs have shown us that anything is possible if we set our minds to it.